Now, coming to the second area, that is getting disrupted by eBPF, which is service mesh. So typically, the service mesh is always based on a sidecar pattern where we attach an envoy proxy to every pod and then use that to talk to a control plane. So with eBPF, are the sidecars completely, are they going away? How does this influence service mesh?
Yeah, so there are different service mesh projects, and some of them are taking a variety of different approaches. So there are certainly some service mesh implementers out there who will tell you the sidecar isn't going away. I personally think that there's a lot to be gained by avoiding sidecars. We know from when we first introduced Cilium service mesh as a beta, and the reaction from a lot of users was, well, this is great because I can save on the resource usage of my sidecars. I don't have to worry about injecting sidecars. I don't have to worry about the complexity of when you inject a sidecar, you've got multiple containers that might come up in different orders. And depending on what order they come up in, that can create problems. If you don't have sidecars, that's a set of problems you don't have to worry about. So there were a lot of reasons why people were interested in avoiding sidecars just because of avoiding the complexity of it. But it's also giving us this really more efficient network path. So if we step back and think about why people had sidecars in the first place, you have these application pods in Kubernetes that are deliberately, by design, isolated from each other. This is the point of containers. It's the point of pods that, application A and application B can coexist on the same machine without worrying about each other. And to do that, they're given their own networking namespace, their networking stack, effectively. And that's by design. But they're still running on the same machine and running using the same kernel. And network packets that are destined for an application pod have to go through the networking stack on the host machine and then through the networking stack in the pod. And that can be quite, it's an extra level of processing for every single network packet. If you can shortcut that path, then so much the better. Your network latency will improve. If we think about sidecars, that makes things even worse because we've got this extra container in the pod, in the pod's network namespace. So our application has to go through the pod's networking, or a packet from the application has to traverse the pod's network namespace, back up through the pod's network stack to the sidecar, back out again from the sidecar to the host, and then through the host network stack. It's quite a convoluted path. If what you're trying to do doesn't involve a proxy, you can have a much shorter path.
I want to interject there. I want to bring this up. So you made a very interesting point, this whole round trip, but that also brings us some advantages like mutual TLS that is auto magically inserted between pods, and suddenly microservices become more secure because they're using MTLS. So how do you see that in the context of eBPF?
Yeah. So one of the things we need to distinguish is what needs to happen at layer 7, the application layer, which is what the proxy is handling, and what's happening at the lower levels. Now, we still need a proxy to handle layer 7 termination whenever we need to terminate layer 7. So we still need a proxy somewhere. We just don't necessarily need a proxy for every single pod. Again, this is something that different service mesh implementations are taking different approaches to. For Cilium, our kind of default is to have one proxy per node, but there are reasons why you might want to have multiple proxies. Maybe you want to have a proxy for a particular application that's particularly noisy, for example. That works, but basically pulling them out of the pod and putting them directly onto the host. Now, MTLS, there's two parts of MTLS. It's giving us mutual authentication, so we understand that the two ends of the connection, we know the identities of those, the two ends of the connection, and they trust each other. And it's also giving you encryption. So having established the identity, we can then use the certificates to encrypt the traffic between the two. Now, it's really one of those situations where it's always worth asking what people really want. For some environments, what they really want is encrypted traffic. And they don't always need the application-to-application identity verification. So one of the things that we can do in Cilium is encrypt traffic in the kernel using WireGuard or IPsec. So that way we know that all traffic is going to be encrypted when it moves from one machine to another. And it's not full MTLS because we haven't done that identity verification, but it is giving us the encryption. And for a lot of regulated environments, that's really what they need. That said, in other environments, the identity verification, the authentication step is important. And we've been working on a kind of next generation authentication approach in Cilium, where we'll use the same TLS handshake to establish the identities, but use the kernel level encryption to encrypt the traffic. So we're separating the act of authentication from the encryption. And that's something that, there are prototypes available already, but it should be available sort of towards the end of the year in the Cilium project. And that will really be, I think, the final piece of the various different requirements that people have when they talk about service mesh.